Okay, get it on, everybody. Welcome to another session in our Webolution series. I'm Zach Napolitano from Cvent's product marketing team, and today we're going behind the curtain to talk about a topic that is mission critical for most marketing teams running a modern operation, and that is running high-performing webinars at scale. Now, listen, scale is relative to your business and where your program's at in its maturity. So if you're hosting 5 webinars a year or 50 or 500, which is a thing, the challenge is still the same, finding that right balance of creativity and repeatability. But before we dive into how our own team does it at Cvent, I want to zoom out for a minute and look at why webinars have become such a critical part of the marketing mix. In other words, why are we having this conversation about scaling webinars in the first place? It's something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. And the quick answer, and a big part of that, is that the way buyers buy and the way they want to engage has completely changed, especially over the last 5 years, which was greatly accelerated by the pandemic. Today, buyers do their own research covertly and independently. They lean on peers and communities they trust, and they lean on AI, which for some, they trust just as much. And more than ever, they'd rather stay anonymous until they're confident they found the right fit. In other words, they don't want to talk to sales until they have to, which the data shows is usually after they've already made their decision. So that shift hasn't just made it harder to earn attention, it's raised the stakes of every interaction. Because when the buyer's in control, every touch point becomes a moment to either build trust or lose it. So as a result, the buying journey itself keeps getting longer. According to Forrester, the average B2B buyer now has 27 interactions with your brand before making a purchase, and that's up from 17 just a few years ago. So not only are buyers harder to reach, but they also require more touch points to build awareness and then ultimately intent. So the takeaway is we need new ways to accelerate conversations, build credibility, and meet buyers wherever they are, even before they raise their hand. Well, check that. The ways to do it don't necessarily have to be new. It's more of a new mindset. Because today, more than ever before, marketers are doubling down on events as the centerpiece of their go-to-market motion. And now listen, I get it. This is a Cvent webinar, so maybe you're thinking, Zach, of course you're going to say that about events. Fair enough. But according to our 2025 Outlook of Events report, where we surveyed over 1,000 marketers, 72% of them said events are their most impactful channel, with their number of events that they're hosting year over year increasing by more than double, from 14 a year in 23 to 29 in 2024. And it makes sense. Events move the needle because one, they reach buyers in every phase of the journey from discovery to renewal. And two, they give you something digital ads or your other channels simply cannot replicate, which is real and authentic engagement and an opportunity to show your brand's unique point of view and expertise. And that's why webinars have become so valuable. They're not just a way to share information. They're a way, again, to earn credibility early in a format that feels low pressure, high value, buyer friendly, easy to share, etc. So I'd argue personally they're the single most cost-effective way to engage top of funnel leads. Not to mention, they are content machines, more on that in a sec. And again, at the top of the funnel, as you can see on the slide, unbeatable for building brand awareness and creating lead gen. In the middle, they help educate buyers and showcase how your solution drives results. And with the right follow-up and right on-demand strategy, that single event can keep fueling engagement long after the broadcast ends. And that's the beauty of thinking about webinars as a strategy and not just as a single event with a beginning and an end. One good webinar can generate weeks or months of content, video clips, blog posts, social snippets, email follow-ups, customer stories, all the material that amplifies your brand presence. In fact, webinars have now eclipsed in-person events as the preferred format for marketers to use, and on-demand content is growing more than 30% year over year. So when you create one time and then repurpose it everywhere, your webinar program can really be the heartbeat of your demand and content engines. And that's exactly what we're going to start unpacking today. How teams like us at Cvent run webinars at scale, what it takes behind the scenes, and how hopefully you can do the same yourself. So for our agenda today, we're going to start with the machine behind the magic, what it takes to run webinars at scale. Then we'll take a look at the pre-production work that makes execution look effortless, go live for the showtime moment, and then talk about what happens after the broadcast, including how we at Cvent are using AI and automation. And then we'll wrap with a lightning round of Q&A, which will be your questions. I encourage you to put those in the Q&A tab to your right or in the chat. And a few I've kept a secret from my co-host Greg until now. Speaking of, joining me today is the star of the show, Greg Jackman, our resident webinar pro. So Greg leads Cvent's global webinar program. We're talking dozens of sessions a year. I think, how many do we do a year? Probably like close to 100 across every region and audience. And he's built one of the most efficient, well-oiled webinar operations I've seen in my time in events. I couldn't think of a better person to take us behind the scenes and show us how it all works. Greg, thanks for being here. How are you? And tell us a little bit more about your role at Cvent.
Good. Thank you, Zach. Hi, everyone. I am Greg Jackman. I'm a demand generation manager here at Cvent. I manage our global webinar program end to end. So that includes all the planning, the execution, the direction of all our webinars, whether it be live like this one, simu-live, pre-recorded, or simu2 live, which is a mix of both. I ensure every webinar delivers a consistent, high-quality experience to our audience. To do that, we use our own webinar platform here, Cvent Webinar. We're all in it today. I'm also responsible for analyzing and presenting the results of our webinars to our marketing teams, our leadership teams, so we can continue to improve strategy and just scale up what works.
Gucci, I love that, Greg. Well, it's great to have you here. So let's get into it. Love that musical cue. Very nice. Little thing you could do in a Cvent webinar. So let's start with what's really going on behind the scenes. And here's where I want to go first. Because when people hear that Cvent runs dozens of webinars in a single month, that might sound massive, maybe a little scary. So what does that actually look like in practice? Who's involved? How do we keep it all moving? And what kind of volume are we really talking about month to month? Greg, can you unpack some of that for us?
Yeah, so I mean, we're producing a ton of webinars at Cvent, usually about a dozen a month in our program. Most of our focus is around what we call our marquee webinars. So those are one marquee webinar per month, big audience, high visibility. We do, quarterly product updates for customers. We do partner webinars for our ecosystem. The cadence and content is really going to depend on what's most relevant to your audience at the time. So I think it all starts with the goal of each webinar. Let me just fix my camera here. There you go. That should be better. Yeah, so with the goals of each webinar here, so are you talking about more your thought leadership session for brand awareness, or maybe more of a solution-focused webinar around mid-funnel education? Once that's clear, the rest kind of fall into place. So your target audience, your promotional plan, your speakers, your content. On the operations side here at Cvent, I have a ton of support. So we've built a really solid system over the years. Every webinar it has its own demand gen owner who defines the audience, the goals, and the promotional strategy. I work closely with the product marketing team, the marketing automation teams, creative teams, the tech support teams for sure, plus the speakers and moderators themselves, just to make sure everything is connecting, right? I do rely heavily on one point of contact on my team, Anshul Chitra. If you put her picture up here, Anshul is a team lead on our demand gen team. She coordinates all the back end work, building Marketo programs, managing email lists, tracking the analytics. She's really the one making every piece come together here, and even is more behind the scenes than I am. So, all this said, you don't need a huge team like this to run a great webinar. We've scaled this up over time. based on, the volume that we need to produce the goals that we want as a marketing team. So even if you're starting out small, it's good to keep in mind that clarity and coordination matter more than size.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying this is a vanity project for me, but Greg, is this a marquee webinar we're on right now?
This is technically not a marquee webinar, but we have focused a lot of our energy in it. So
okay, because usually we're gonna have to talk to my agent after that because I don't get out of bed for anything but a marquee.
Mm-hmm.
We'll treat this as a marquee, but let's move on to the next topic. And you touched on something really important there. And this came up during our prep too. Scale comes from clarity, not size. I love that quote. Yeah. So Greg, tell me a little bit more about this because I think there's a lot of teams that get stuck here. They assume, okay, if we want to do more webinars, if we want to scale this channel out, we need more people. We need to throw more bodies at the problem, and they're not really thinking about how to refine the process to get into that well-oiled machine mode.
Right. So these are things I think about every day. We want our webinars to be creative. You can do gamification. You can shoot on location. I mean, you could try new formats like that. But you do have to anchor those ideas in reality, right? So I think it starts with delivering that quality experience for your audience. You guys are giving your time to us. Your time is valuable. So before anything else, the foundation of a webinar needs to be solid. The content, the flow, the execution, things like that. I compare it kind of like to steering a ship. You can add all the crew you want, more people, but what really matters is keeping the ship steady, right? Keeping it afloat. You can make sure everything's strong. If anything breaks, you need to be ready to fix it as quickly as you can. Having those backup plans ready and basically making sure your ship doesn't sink, right? So that's how you scale, through clarity and structure and calmness under pressure, right? Not just through headcount.
Yeah, I love that point. And sticking with the ship analogy, too many people on the ship, the boat gets heavy and starts taking on water. You don't want too many chefs in the kitchen either. So it's about finding that right balance of process and personnel. So yeah, the bigger you get, the more clarity you need. It's not just about more people. Which leads us to our first three takeaways of today, directly from Greg, which is build systems that repeat, align your internal teams early, and of course, don't expect perfection right out of the gate. Every successful webinar program that I've ever been a part of starts somewhere, and it probably starts a little bit messy. What matters is that you keep improving over time and compound all of that momentum. All right, Florence, that's the machine. Let's talk before the broadcast. Do I have some music? This is where the magic really starts. Those weeks of planning that make the live event look and feel effortless to the audience. Greg, you've told me your process actually gets started about 70 days before each webinar, maybe even a little bit more when we're talking about topic submission. Walk us through that. What does that prep window look like? And how do you keep everything on track when you're juggling not just the webinar that's in front of you, but all of the webinars that are on Cvent's calendar, a dozen a month?
The irony is unbelievable. I am sorry about that, guys. My computer was freezing and I closed down a bunch of stuff now. But I mean, yeah.
A huge topic today is about being prepared. Now,
this is
you can't prepare for that. That happens sometimes. But to our production team's credit, I mean, we had the technical difficulties video queued up.
There you go.
Lauren had the chat strategy going. Thank you for everyone who hung around. But I think it illustrates your point, Greg. Even, things will go wrong occasionally, but it's great to have that preparation in place. I think we handled it pretty well. Good job by us.
Yes, good job. Thank you, guys. So where did we leave off here for the broadcast?
That's right. So I was just saying, the weeks before the broadcast, right, and the rigor and planning that goes into making the actual live broadcast feel effortless. For you, Greg, it starts, it's not a week before, 2 weeks before. You're thinking about this stuff 90 days out?
Yeah. So, I mean, the topic really gets locked down 90 days out for us. That's when it hits our master webinar plan. My part really starts more around 70 days before the event. I create the Cvent webinar, start lining up all the logistics from the speakers to the moderators to the demand gen owner who's managing the production, the promotion end. We typically schedule, 2 key prep meetings, a quick 15-minute tech check, run through a high level, run a show, and then a longer 1-hour dry run where we run through the entire webinar with the speakers, record it, then that doubles as a backup if we ever had to use it. But from there, I live by checklists. I've got separate lists for 1 week out, 3 days out, 48 hours out, the day of, and even the minutes leading up to going live in a webinar. So those lists have, obviously evolved over time. Every hiccup adds a new line item, but they are the reason why our webinars run smoothly. And as you can imagine, it is a tricky balance, making the list thorough enough to cover almost anything and be prepared for anything, but not bogging down the process so much that we can still operate, our program at scale. Sometimes, you have to take calculated risks. You can't predict everything. You can prepare for certain things, like a power outage or a speaker dropping off. Perfect example. Anyway, on that topic, webinar horror stories. If you have one, please put it in the chat here. I'm going to share one myself in a little bit, but maybe we can, bounce stories off each other right here and be a little therapy session for us.
Yeah, we could use that therapy. And
I can use it right now.
One thing I joke about all the time, because I'm a huge fan of the Kiefer Sutherland show, Designated Survivor, I like to nominate a designated survivor in case something like what happened to Greg happened. If you saw our behind the scenes chat, I was ready to step in. I was going to put on that expert hat and do a little Greg impression. Lucky for you, Greg is back.
We can save that till we're off.
Yeah. So Greg, we're talking, we've been talking about process and this idea of scale. When you're doing 50 plus webinars a year, one question I've always had is, how do you actually decide what's worth doing? Because there's that balance. On one hand, you need a steady stream of fresh ideas to keep that machine rolling. And it's really easy to go, ooh, idea, let me jump on that. I need to feed this machine. On the other hand, like you mentioned, attendees are giving you their time, and you got to make sure that those ideas are quality and that they'll resonate and deliver real value. So tell us a little bit more how you pick the topics and speakers, how you keep promotion fresh, and the tools that help you, stay sane and grounded in the process.
Yeah, I think it starts as simple as just listening. We have a great market insight team along with our content and demand gen teams who track what's resonating currently with our audiences, from region and persona and topic. So for example, no surprise, AI is one of the hottest topics this year and past couple of years. So we're in the middle of a mini AI series right now that'll go, through the end of this year and into next year probably. We also have our event trends webinars that we have every January and then halfway through the year in June, and those are always our top performers, as far as registration and attendance goes. But for speakers, we like to mix up, have our internal speakers on, Cventers, and external voices as well. So customers, partners, industry experts, industry pros, those outside perspectives give real credibility to your program and always, keep your content fresh as well. On the promotion side, email is still our number one channel there. We do use social and digital ads selectively, but our typical email cadence is, three emails leading up to the webinar, including that 1 hour reminder email before the webinar goes live. That usually gives us a big lift and reg. And then, we've even had emails set up to send out 5 minutes after the webinar. So, people forget, it drops off their calendars, and that quick nudge can really boost your show rates. So, as far as behind the scenes stuff, automated things, we're using Cvent Webinar, we use Marketo, Salesforce, all integrated together so our sales teams can follow up fast when someone engages. But if you're just starting out, my biggest piece of advice is don't overthink it, experiment, learn, move on. Nothing is perfect, obviously. You want to aim for that progress and not perfection. So you also want to keep communication constant between your teams. So even like a little missed approval or a late asset can snowball real quickly. And so that steady rhythm of check-ins with your team, keeps everything running smoothly as well.
Yeah, great points. And it's true. You're preparing for a live broadcast. So every little detail in the process is important. That's such a great window, Greg, from how you pick the topics all the way down to our production window. I'm curious how that compares with some of the people we have in the audience today. I think that brings us to our first poll of how far in advance you plan your webinars. Greg just said he's about a 70-day planning window, 90-ish days if we're talking about speaker submissions and topics, for example. So we'll see if any of, take a look at those results. It looks like so far, most people are in that 60-day window. We have some people in that 1 to 2 month range. Cool. Yeah. Healthy balance between the two. No one is going into full fire drill mode. At least if they are, they're not telling us the truth about it. So good to see. Keep voting those polls. We'll have a few more throughout. So Greg, you're planning 70 days ahead. How do you personally stay organized when you're juggling so many events and all the responsibilities and tasks that go into producing a great webinar?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just simply comes down to organization, time management. And I know that's not a great answer to this question, not the answer you might be looking for, but no real secrets or surprise there. It's just learning what works best for you and your team over time, right? So lately I've started leaning into AI tools here and there, automating those repetitive tasks, giving us the ability to add things to our program. And we'll get into more AI stuff in a bit, but I simply, a lot of the things I rely on Outlook reminders or tasks for each webinar. I mentioned the checklist before. Those are huge. More of a team level, we use Rike as our project management tool. So that, helps the back-end teams manage workflows. We have dedicated Slack channels for every single webinar that we're doing. That keeps, the real-time communication flowing. So it's kind of like that structure, I think, that keeps everything calm. So the more organized you are, I think there's less room for chaos. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, well said. So let's break down what happens at each of these stages. Love the way you laid this out for us, Greg, in a timeline view. Can you just quickly summarize what goes into each of these different flow stages?
Yeah, sure. So like pretty methodical here. Create, build the event in Cvent webinar, QA the settings, plan, you're locking down your speakers, you're finalizing the abstracts, which, the descriptions of your webinar on the registration page, launching the promotional plan, dry run, you're rehearsing the flow, testing the tech, final QA, polish up the slides, confirm your contingency plans, have those ready, live, execute with composure. And then post-event, you pivot quickly to that on-demand recording and the follow-up emails.
Beautiful. So if you want to remove the chaos from your process, this is the playbook. Build templates so you're not reinventing every time. Set real timelines so you're not cramming at the end. And make sure your team is invested so no one drops the ball. Execution shouldn't fall on one person's shoulders, even if you have someone with muscled shoulders as large and broad as Greg's from a figurative standpoint, carrying our webinar organization here. So Greg, I know, the idea of preparation really hits close home for you with your Scout background, right?
Yes. So if we want to click through here a little bit, I think we're on the next slide, or Jake, I think. So Jake is filling in for me as producer, and if I have some images to show you that show off my dorkiness as a teenager. So yeah, I was in Scouts, as a kid, and the Scout motto was really, be prepared. So I've kind of carried that, throughout my career and up to this point. So be prepared. The more time, the more prepared you are, the more confidence that you're going to have, and hopefully that trickles down, to your speakers and moderators into a webinar. So I think, I talk about the checklist and all those things that really, keeps me grounded and keeps me prepared.
Yeah, well said. And that's why, you never look stressed backstage. The more you prepare, the more you've gone through it, the calmer you feel. And speakers feed off that. Like we had that snafu earlier. I felt fine because we had done the preparation beforehand, and Greg made sure that I knew everything I needed to know, even if something went wrong. Now, to lighten things up here, pull out one of my favorite all-time movie quotes from the character Brody in Point Break. Fear causes hesitation, and hesitation causes all of your worst fears to come true. Now, you might argue that was a little bit of an awkward fit for that quote, but I've been looking to work that into a webinar for a long time now. So you let me know how I did. Anyway, we've covered how Cvent preps before going live. Now it's time to look at what happens once we go live, once those lights go on. Pausing for the music. No time. The part everyone sees, and we're talking about the live webinar itself. Greg, you've said before, this is where all the prep pays off, but also where things can go sideways fast, as we learned. So in your mind, what separates a good live webinar from a great one? I feel like most people are doing a pretty good job these days, but cream rises to the top. What do the best producers and speakers do differently once the camera is on?
Right. So this is the moment where everything comes together. This is game day. So one key thing that I'll call out off the top here is having that dedicated moderator, keeping an eye on chat and Q&A behind the scenes, coordinating with the speakers on camera through an internal back-end chat. So shout out to Lauren, who is doing that today for us behind the scenes in this webinar. In a perfect world, the speakers engaging the chat and the Q&A too, as I am literally trying to do it now. And Libby, I see your question about what I did with that snafu on the back end, and we'll get to that. But yeah, best practice is engaging the audience, some sort of audience interaction every 3 minutes. Polls, shout outs, breaking down the fourth wall, and to do that, a moderator plays a big role in that. And trying my best to keep an eye on chat and Q&A here as I go through this. But one of the other big things is just the point is to be real. People, I think, connect with authenticity way more than they do polish, right? So when you're open and more human and not afraid to laugh at yourself, I think the audience can feel that. I think that can make a world of a difference. So yes, structure and preparation do matter, but when you go live, the goal is just to be as natural as possible, as difficult as that could be.
Yeah, let's stay on that idea of confidence for a minute. So you've worked with a lot of speakers, some total pros like me, some brand new to webinars. What do you do to help them show up feeling relaxed, confident, and ready to deliver when that red light goes on and you're live in front of a pretty large audience?
Yeah, so I mean, every speaker is going to be different. So I try to gauge their comfort level before we even hit record, before we even meet. Just getting to know them a little bit as much as I can as far as like their expertise level with webinars in general or speaking in general. In the dry run, if we need to focus on that confidence building, like pacing, showing them transitions, anything that might trip them up. It's all about removing those surprises for them. So, for example, right before we go live, I always do a quick high-level run-through of the run of show, so the speakers know exactly when they'll come on camera, what their cues are. I reassure them that I have eyes on their audio and video, so they don't have to worry about that. They should just be focused on the content and talking to the audience. So I feel like my job is a lot of the time is to keep the energy calm. So if I stay relaxed, that confidence will hopefully convey to the speakers and the moderators. That's how I look at it. And as we just saw, webinars will always throw curveballs at you. But if your speakers feel supported, then they should be able to recover from almost anything.
Yeah, calm leaders create calm speakers. So let's see where everyone's biggest stress point is once they're live in their webinars. Our next poll: what's your biggest challenge during live webinars? Speaker nerves, audience engagement, tech issues, or juggling chats and slides? I'm trying to think what mine is. I always fear the tech issue. In terms of horror stories, I'll tell one really quickly as we're waiting for people to vote. I made the mistake, I think Chrome, this was before I got to Cvent, Chrome reinstalled some updates, and I never remembered to allow my browser to have screen sharing permissions. So I got on the live webinar and I was completely blocked from screen sharing. And I was in such a panic that it was probably an easy solution, but it hit me by such total surprise that I just completely froze. And it was one of the worst feelings of my life. I felt like the world was collapsing around me, even though there's probably like 4 people on the webinar / demo. But it reminds me, always, always, always practice everything, including things you might take for granted, like screen sharing, because you never know. Even if you have the best webinar platform, who knows what your browser is going to do? Who knows what your Wi-Fi is going to do? Okay, so we have cool. So the results are pretty well across the board for all 4 answer choices, but Steve Harvey voice, tech issues was the #1 answer. All right, moving along. Let's keep building on what we've been talking about. And this is another quote from Greg that I really like, and I think it's true. The best webinars don't feel like presentations. They feel like insightful conversations. Greg, how do you make that happen in real time? How do you keep people engaged, connected, awake, so that they're actually tuning in and not in full-on multitask mode?
Yeah, this is actually a part I really like talking about, mainly I think because they're actual tangible things that you can do with webinars, not just theory or concept, right? So the best webinars are interactive from the start. They're not talking at the audience, you're talking with them. So here are a few things that could help. Tell a personal story early on, maybe within the first 10 minutes. Share something real that happened to you, a challenge, a mistake, an aha moment that you experienced. It gives people that like, hey, that's me sort of thing. And you can kind of lean into that and play off that. Use people's names when you answer an attendee question. Say an attendee's name. It's simple, but it instantly grabs their attention. You hear your own name, your ears just naturally perk up. Interact every few minutes. The polls, looking at Q&A, we talked about that. Every 3 minutes, I think, is a good rhythm if you can meet that. Stay authentic. Don't try to be perfect. Be human. If something goes wrong, laugh it off. Like I was saying, people can relate way more to that than they can be for being super polished and stiff, right? Reset your energy, as a speaker, a quick smile or a posture fix can re-energize you. Silence is golden is one I really like. I think, a few seconds of quietness, it isn't the worst thing in the world in a webinar. I think it's a common misconception that if a webinar is silent for a few seconds, people are just going to tune out and leave. But, in fact, our brains need those breaks. Our brains need that time to process what's been said. So, in today's webinar, I've been trying to pause for a few seconds at each one of these segments, playing the sound clips, and that's intentional. Just try to give your mind a break, give Zach and I a break, and let what we're saying try and really sink in with you and let you process that. So, and then finally, repeating important points. You can literally say to the audience something like, "Hey, I know you might be multitasking right now," like Zach was just saying, but I really want to point this out to you. I really want this to sink in. So, it's no secret that people are multitasking right now. You're probably doing it right now. So calling it out too might get their attention. But, overall, some of these things may seem kind of minor, but they do add up. And I think that's how you turn like a broadcast into more of a conversation.
Cool. Love those engagement hacks. And by the way, in the resources tab, if you want these tips from Greg, his hacks, his golden rules, etc., you can download the slides to this presentation. All righty. So before we move on, we couldn't resist sharing one of Greg's, let's call it learning moments. Probably my favorite part of today's webinar. Greg,
add to the list. Do you want me to tee that up?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Jake, if you could pull up that reenactment video I made. I had a little fun with Sora here. A couple of years ago, I lost power right before a live webinar, and I started the stream fine, but I couldn't pull the speakers up on stage. I looked out the window. The power crew was at the end of my driveway in the street, working on the power lines there. I ran out there, probably looking half crazy. And Sora does a great job of making people look crazy, by the way. I was asking them, when's the power going back on? I'm hosting a virtual event for hundreds of people, but of course, there's nothing they can do about it, in that moment. So, meanwhile, the audience was seeing and hearing nothing. It might have even been before we had that technical issues graphic up that Jake pulled up, but our moderator didn't have much experience directing. They had to jump in for me pretty cold. To their credit, they figured it out. Cvent Webinar is easy to use like that. You just need to know where to look, right? And I didn't put them in a good position for that sort of scenario. So we got back on track after a couple minutes, but those couple minutes can feel like an eternity in that sort of scenario. So unfortunately, we didn't provide the audience with the best experience up front, but we recovered. But it was on me. I didn't train my moderators properly to be ready for that. Now I know better. I make sure every moderator knows what to do if I drop, just basic level things. So lesson learned, things will go wrong. It's not a matter of if, but when, right? And it's how you react that matters, how you prepare. And to Libby's point here, she has a question in the Q&A. I'll just display it right now to address it. I'd like to know how you handled that snafu on the back end. We struggled with the way to communicate in the platform with our speakers without a backup house view. So, yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, my computer froze. I was just shutting down, browsers and tabs, anything that I did not need. I was communicating with Zach, Jake, and Lauren on the back end in Slack. I have Slack on my phone, just saying like, hey, I froze. I should be back in a minute. And, they seem to roll with that pretty well. So, yeah, good question.
Yeah, I personally love how we had the technical difficulties visual queued up. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And I like, even it looked like it's, breaking the fourth wall a little bit, but it looks like even Lauren had pre-prepared chats in case of the worst as well. So it's all about the whole team being prepared because, like you said, Greg, it's not if, it's when.
And I want to be clear that snafu, I swear, was not planned. This isn't a demonstration. We don't want that to happen. But we're good.
We are good. Yeah, the show must go on, right? So yep. I'm ready to jump into our next section where the webinar is over. Not this one, of course. The chat is closed, and hopefully everyone's feeling good. But Greg, you've said this before. Some of the real work starts when the broadcast ends. So walk us through what happens after the applause. What do you do in those next 24 hours that sets up everything that comes after?
Right. I mean, the first thing I do immediately is congratulate and thank the speakers. I mean, they're the stars of the show. The webinar literally doesn't happen without them, right? So besides that, I quickly pivot to the on-demand recording, make sure it's available, cleaned up fast, that it's ready to go in our follow-up email that goes out the next day with key takeaways. I'll get into more of that in a minute. Any CTAs you want to include in that. With Cvent Webinar, it records the webinar automatically, so within minutes, it's ready to go to send out for registrants. But I essentially, I trim the front end and the back end of a recording. Sometimes we play those ads up front, so when the attendee or the registrants go to watch the replay, it'll just start right when the webinar starts. But aside from the cleanup, the real focus should be about the momentum. So basically, you want to keep that conversation going with your audience while the webinar, the content is fresh in their minds.
Yeah, and you know what? Believe it or not, I feel like this is the first ever webinar I've been a part of as a host or attendee where someone didn't ask, are you recording? Will there be a replay of this available? Of course, the answer is yes. And it will be in your inbox not long after we do close this one out. But let's take a look at our next poll, if you could be so kind. How quickly does everyone publish their webinar recording? Same day, 2 days, within a week? It depends. Grimace emoji. What say you in the audience? I always, I'm of the same day or next day mind. We have a few, it depends. We have a within a week. We have a within 2 days. Okay. I'd love to see some same dayers out there. Okay, cool. Actually, there is one response, same day. Good job. You're probably a Cvent customer. Beautiful. All right. So Greg, I know in terms of that topic, you're a next day or bust kind of producer. Why is that so important once the webinar is over to get that replay out?
Yeah. So, speed keeps that engagement high. Like I was saying, people are still mentally in the session somewhat in that headspace after your webinar. You want to capitalize on that. Cvent webinar helps out a lot, with the follow-up emails automatically sending out from the tool itself with the recording link. But a quick turnaround also boosts internal momentum. So sales can start using content immediately. I create, clips or snippets of our webinars in separate files. I use Descript as our video editing tool, which uses AI to break down the transcript into those clips, and then I can export them as individual files. From there, the content team can use them, in any specific, asset that they're working on, any specific subtopic they want to include in there. It's also useful for sales to share that content with their prospects and customers as they see fit as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a smart way to extend the life of a single webinar, one of our big themes for today. And this is, in my opinion, where the elite webinar programs separate themselves, taking that one event and not forgetting about it because you've been working on it for 2.5 months and you're sick of it, but have the process in place to turn all that effort you put into production and content development to fuel your entire demand engine for weeks, if not months to come. And that really does create a flywheel effect. That's why I love this visual. It shows how you can turn 1 hour of content to months of impact. So Greg, if you could walk us through your flywheel here, what are some of these key steps you follow after every one of these you run?
Yeah, sure. So, 5 R's. It always starts with the basics. Record, make sure the session is captured cleanly, trim that front and back. Repurpose, you export the transcript, put it in your video editing tool, pull out those clips for social, sales, and even blogs. That's how one webinar fuels multiple channels. Report, measure on the right things. At Cvent in our global webinar program, we focus on 5 KPIs. So registration, attendees, show rate, and what we call hand raisers and warm MQLs. Re-engage, use that data to send smart follow-ups and nurture sequences, and refine, apply what you've learned in this webinar to the next webinar. Every webinar feeds into the next. It's a loop, not a line.
Yeah. Again, it's how a single webinar can really be the source material for a full campaign. So let's stay on that idea for a second. Again, this is a really big mindset shift. Webinars aren't one-day events. They're ongoing campaigns that can power the entire marketing mix. So when you capture and repurpose the right moment, a great quote, a great demo, a story from a customer, that content can live on your blog, in sales decks, on social, and your follow-up emails. So one good webinar, again, does not have to end when the broadcast does. In fact, I urge you that it shouldn't, because a lot of effort goes into it. It keeps driving awareness, engagement, and hopefully lead gen and pipeline for weeks to come. And that brings us to Greg's post-event checklist, the non-negotiables that make all of this work. So if you're building your own post-event checklist, start right here. Get your recording out fast, repurpose the content everywhere, and measure what matters, because registrations it's just one part of the story. It doesn't prove success. The impact does. Greg mentioned some of the KPIs that are really important that we track for our entire program. So speaking of impact, one of the biggest drivers of it right now is, of course, AI. How we're using it to do all this faster and smarter is our next topic. So let's jump right into it. All right, so we've talked about people and process. Now let's get a little bit more into the tech. Greg, you've been experimenting with AI inside your webinar workflow. I guess the big question on everyone's mind is what's actually working? What's, where's the proof in the pudding versus just like some novelty stuff that might be fly by night? How are you using it in your day-to-day to make things easier for you? And, of course, not losing that human touch that you've been emphasizing throughout today's conversation.
Yeah, from a day-to-day perspective, I'm using it to speed things up and spark new ideas, essentially. We'll get into those specifics in a second. Zach, do we want to do another poll here, quick pulse check with the audience?
Yeah, that would be great. So I'm really curious to hear where everyone is experimenting with AI today, content creation, promotion, analytics, or if you haven't started yet, that's totally fine too. I get it. So check out our next poll. Let us know what you're doing. And as those results are coming in, let's get specific, Greg, and tell us about some of your favorite AI use cases, anything that's really made a difference for you.
Yeah, for sure. So absolutely. I'd say, my favorite use hands down right now, using AI to create 3 key takeaways that go into our post-webinar follow-up email. So after a live webinar, I use our video editing tool, copy the transcript, paste it into AI, see what it comes up with. So, let's be honest, not a lot of people are going to have the time or the interest to watch a full hour long recording of a webinar. So the insights, those 3 insights are meant to, keep people engaged again, keep them in that mindset. If they didn't attend, maybe it does encourage them to watch the full recording. If they did attend, it's, a reminder of what they learned. So honestly, at our scale, doing something like that manually would be next to impossible, but with AI, makes it quick, repeatable, and without losing any quality. Another one I like is using AI to come up with seeded questions or comments in the chat. So for a webinar, just using it to brainstorm a few starter type questions, get the juices flowing for our audience, get them in that right mindset, hopefully spark them to think of their own questions. And once that chat gets going and some back and forth happens, engagement will pick up. Third area is SEO optimization. So in Cvent Webinar, here we have a built-in SEO tool that helps our webinars show up in search. So I take the webinar description, a list of high-performing SEO terms at the time, run them through AI. It recommends the best mix of terms to include in there. So it's not only a simple way to get our webinars found before webinar begins, so you get the registration and then the attendance, but also after the webinar is over too, so it's found on our on-demand pages. But finally, overall, I do like to remind our team that AI supports the work; it doesn't replace it. And I'm sure you guys have heard that before in many places, but I'd like to think of it as like that eager new intern where they're super fast and they have lots of potential, but you still need to check their work. So in my opinion, like Zach was saying, it comes down to the human side, connections, storytelling, empathy, all that. This is where that's what's really going to drive engagement at the end of the day for your webinars.
I love the intern analogy. Willing and able, of course, but it still needs that human head to guide them and maybe prevent them from doing something that's going to get them canceled at the office holiday party. So we've covered people, process, and technology. Now let's put it all together with a few final questions. We have some great ones that were submitted, so we're going to get to those. But before we do that, quick reminder, if you'd like to earn a $100 e-gift card, you could sign up for a Cvent demo right now. Just click the button that's popped up or about to pop up on the bottom of your screen. And if you're joining us from outside the US, the card can be converted to the currency of your choice. I don't think it can be converted to Bitcoin, but definitely multiple currencies. All right, Greg, I'm going to start with some questions submitted by their audience. So,
yeah,
what are your thoughts? Maybe I'll answer this one since you've been talking so much. Just kidding. What are your thoughts about including clips of the webinar in the follow-up email? I'll just say I like when I've gotten webinar recaps where it's not like, hey, click this link and go to a video, which is fine. I like when the best clips and quotes become like little GIFs in the post-event follow-up to give me a sense of the human side of the webinar and some of the content that I might have missed out on. So in that sense, Rebecca, I really love that personally. Greg, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, clips are more digestible than a full recording, and everyone's strapped for time. I'm trying to, think of this, in my day-to-day. I love the idea of just having those clips in there as well. It's a good idea.
What about another question that came in anonymously? I don't know why this person chose to protect their identity. It's a very innocuous question. Is there a recommendation on how long to keep on-demand recordings available? Just concerned with video storage limits.
Yeah, my first thought is 90 days. Maybe that's, I know a lot of our recordings for some of our events are online for that long. It's really a vague answer, but maybe that might be a good place to start. And then, just experimenting with, seeing how many people actually visit it and watch, the recordings may help you, move forward and make better decisions.
Yeah, I think like if it's super topical, 90 days is about right. But speaking from experience, if you have an evergreen topic that is always going to resonate, I know there's been webinars that I've done multiple years ago that still get on-demand views. I love seeing those notifications come through. It means you have a great topic. So topical, 90 days, your evergreen stuff, keep it there longer unless you feel like it's going to get dated. How did someone mentioned the resources tab? We have some stuff in our resources tab. So how do you add the resources tab to your studio in advance? This is a little bit more of a product question. Does it allow LinkedIn links to work? Our biggest feedback from attendees is that links don't hyperlink in the chat.
Right. Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, the links don't work in the chat. I think, it's due to security issues. I've raised that with our product team before, and, that's where we landed with it. It comes down to the security. So we do leverage the resources tab as much as we can for PDFs or other assets like that. And, if we do need to put something in the chat, a link in there, I'm creating a UTM for it. It shortens it up for one. And so that's how we handle it for now.
Cool. We've got about a minute and a half left, so I'm going to jump into some of the questions I prepared for you, Greg. I don't know. Hopefully these don't take you by surprise. But my first question for you, this one's very actionable for the audience, is what's the one tool you can't live without when you're producing?
I mean, obviously, besides the webinar tool itself, you mean like?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it a few times in today's webinar. The video editing tool, we use Descript. So I use it for all of our Simu Live recorded webinars, any videos we play in webinars, trimming them up, any post-production work that needs to go into that, generating the snippet files, the chapter files. It uses AI to generate the timestamps and everything like that. And that's what helps us come up with, the transcript helps us come up with those 3 takeaways that we're including in the follow-up email as well. So a lot of uses with Descript.
Love it. I'll do one more before we wrap up. Biggest mistake you've learned from on live air. This isn't necessarily a blooper or terrible thing like with the power crew. Just something you've kind of noticed and have addressed.
Worst mistake. I mean, mistakes. Something that does always make me laugh is when someone behind the scenes accidentally puts themselves on stage and they just look shocked and surprised. And I know it looks pretty unprofessional, but from a production standpoint, but it doesn't happen a lot, and I can click them off right after. But I just find it funny, their reactions. And again, these are live events, so things go wrong, and you just need to laugh them off.
Yeah, right on. So that's a wrap for today's session. Greg, huge thank you for taking us behind the curtain and sharing how this all really comes together. from planning to post-event. See, I took one of your tips. I'm thanking the speaker right even before we've ended.
Perfect.
And to everyone who joined, thanks for spending the full hour with us. We hope you're leaving with a few ideas you could bring back to your own webinar program. Finally, as Greg mentioned earlier, the on-demand replay will be available very soon. We move fast around here, so keep an eye on your inbox for that follow-up email. With that said, life is a series of hellos and goodbyes. I'm afraid for now there's a goodbye. On behalf of our producers, Jake and Lauren, my co-host Greg, and the entire Cvent team, this is Zach saying Gucci and mahalo. See you again next time. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.